Welcome everyone. On behalf of Portman Partners and the Tech Capital, I welcome you to Competence is the New Charisma, Leadership for an Evolving World. We have over 100 registrants for this panel, which was born on the back of a blog written by Portman Partners Associate Dr. Terry Simkin, where she points out that charismatic leaders are those who are seen to be highly successful in their fields. They are more often than not articulate, polished, and extroverts. They are exalted for their ability to schmooze as well as get things done. I'm sure we can all think of at least one or two high-profile charismatic leaders in business or the political world that fit the bill. But many have been successful, others less so. Terry argues that leadership is a mutable construct that must evolve depending on the context and respond effectively to the needs of others, that leadership is not confined to one immutable fixed modus operandi. Leadership must be seen as an activity rather than a role, and scrutiny of the fundamentals of yesterday's business context must give way to reconceptualization of the organization of tomorrow. While the pandemic has pushed the issue into the limelight, questions about how leadership should be enacted have percolated for too many years. But before we get going, just some housekeeping. This panel is being recorded, so we ask you that please to keep your video off and audio on mute. And we recommend that if you can to keep your screen on speaker mode. There would also be a Q&A session at the end of the panel, so please do put your questions in the chat box, which I believe will be on the right side of your screen. And if they are directed to a specific panelist, please indicate that when submitting the question. But now let's get started, because we brought together a fantastic speaker lineup, which I'm happy to welcome. We've got Amelie Young-Weave, an expert in resilience and a disaster risk reduction and recovery advisor with the United Nations. We've got Adam Hawkins, head of search and staffing covering EMEA and LATAM for LinkedIn. Sheila Narayanan, STEAM evangelist, tech for good executive, startup advisor and mentor, and president of Vulcan Consultants. Dave Pye, chairman of Portman Partners, and Laura Hay, global head of insurance for KPMG. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time to being on this panel and all the preparation that has gone into it. Instead of me speaking now for the next 10 minutes about each one of you, let me get you to introduce yourselves. And at the same time, as you introduce yourselves, give us 2 or 3 ingredients, just 2 or 3 words of what makes them more than leader. So who are we going to go first? Maybe let's go with the order that I said the names. Amelie.
Hi, everyone. Good evening from Madagascar and Paramaribo. I like to say, when I'm asked what I do is I like to say I'm into diamonds, but inner diamonds. I like to unlock people and institutions' capacity. I like to unlock their resilience, getting them back on their feet and recovering from crisis for after bouncing forward. So I would say my main pain is people suffering. So therefore my work and my life mission is supporting people during these moments of suffering. So before, during and after the crisis. So as Joao mentioned, I'm currently disaster risk reduction and recovery advisor at the United Nations office in Madagascar, and also supporting global thought leadership on building resilience in fragile states, prevention, and human security. And looking forward, yes, to dive into leadership. You asked us, Joao, what I would say about being a leader, and I think we're going to discuss about that during all that time. So my only word that that comes to my mind is I hope that with this conversation tonight, each of us here, including the panelists and participants, we're going to uncover something more of the leaders, the leadership, the leader we have in us, with whether it's in our work, in our communities, and in our lives. So I'm honored and grateful to be part of this panel, and I'm also really grateful to be in this event, because whether you're a leader, whether you speak about leadership or not, you still have so much to discover about what is being a true leader and the leader that the world needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. It's always an evolving role. Adam?
Hi, everybody. Greetings from London. So my name's Adam Hawkins. I'm working for LinkedIn, been with LinkedIn now 4 years, operate in EMEA and Latin America capacity. Been in the talent landscape, I would say, for over 21 years. Actually worked with Dave in the past lived and worked abroad, lived in Switzerland, and led teams all over the world. So we're excited to be here today, and as Amelia says, talk about all things leadership. I think your question is a good one. I think it's not so simple answer, Zhao. I think around the components of leadership. I think there's an overarching comment, which is leadership has never been more complex than right now. There are so many different elements, especially the pandemic, and I think it can't be as linear as maybe it has been in the past and rely on certain competencies. I think there are so many things that we will explore today, but top of list is compassion for sure, fairness while we're managing hybrid and remote teams, ability to lead to situation, and overarching for me is the ability to be human-centric. That's what shines above for me.
Thank you, Adam. And I think that's a very good point, because I think that's where the pandemic really brought to the limelight, is the human aspect of interactions that we have in the office, in the business world, in being leaders and being people that follow leaders. Let's go now with Sheila.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Sheila Narayanan. I'm talking to you from New York on a snowy 2 feet of snow outside. So I'm thrilled to be part of this panel. Thank you for inviting me to such a diverse panel with insightful participation. So to summarize my background, I started off as a rocket scientist working on military jets as an engineer, and over time moved into become a tech executive, pioneering data, big data and analytics, and then more recently pivoting towards inequities in tech, whether it's the tech for underrepresented groups and their access, or using tech for good. So as an executive who's traversed many industries, worked on 3 continents, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of leadership from many vantage points. So, and ranging from tech to financial services to nonprofits, I have a pretty broad perspective. I think I would summarize my view of leadership across industries, and even across time, as having some foundational basics that really don't change, irrespective of the times that we're in. Establishing trust and integrity as a leader, practicing inclusion and hearing a diversity of voices, not just gender, ethnicity, but style and thought, demonstrating humanity, empathy, a connection with the humanity, not merely loyalty to the bottom line. So I think those are the 3 things that I think remain constant, irrespective of the times that we're in.
Thank you, Sheila. That's a very good point, the constant aspects of leadership as well. That even a global pandemic can't really change too much, just maybe exacerbate a bit more. And Dave, you are involved with a lot of different businesses and a lot of things around the world. Tell us who you are and your view.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. My name is Dave Pye. I'm the chair of Portman Partners. We're a search firm that works in the data center digital infrastructure space. I've been in the recruitment and talent arena for 35 years. I'm absolutely passionate about leadership and the different characteristics of leadership. Has thrown that lack of understanding into even clearer focus. So it'd be great to see how we discuss this as the panel. And I guess I'm going to finish by saying that although I am in London, I would like to be in Madagascar.
I mean, we do have a very international, it's a very international panel. We can definitely throw in more geographies. Next time we'll do the panel at Emily's place. Down in Madagascar and broadcasting to everyone else. But Laura, last but not the least, tell us, because you work with thousands of people across the world, so your view will be very interesting as well.
Yeah, so again, thank you for inviting me to this panel, and each panelist is so incredible. I'm looking forward to the discussion today. My name is Laura Hay, and I'm the global head of KPMG's insurance practice. So I lead a team of over 10,000 people around the world in 80 countries, covering audit, tax, and advisory services for the insurance and reinsurance industries. I've been in this role for about 4 years. Prior to that, I was the US head of insurance for 7 years. I served on the KPMG board of directors and for 5 years in the US and had an inside view into leadership lessons while serving on the board of directors as well. I guess I would start by saying I'm a firm believer in situational leadership. I do think that leadership styles need to flex to the situations, and I would say in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of crisis leadership, some of which has been good, some of which has been not so good. But I think so believing in situational leadership, there's some underpinning principles that need to occur. The ones that I feel most strongly about are authenticity, empathy, and collaboration. And finally, I will finish up by saying that my life's work is to develop and promote women in leadership positions. I'm going to do it till I die. And so I spend a lot of time speaking, particularly about women and leadership challenges and opportunities for driving a more inclusive culture in companies. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. And that's a very important aspect, because I mean, the more brains you bring to the table, or the more minds you bring to the table, the better the business outcome is going to be anyway, because you get more perspectives, more fresh perspectives. I think you've had an outage in Madagascar.
Yeah.
You can still hear us, yeah? Okay. So I'm going to just throw the first question. The first question will be, sorry, I got to be distracted. The first question will be, is charismatic leadership truly behind us, especially taking into account everything that happened over the last 2 years? Who would like to go first on taking that one? Otherwise, I'll choose. Yeah, Sheila.
I'm happy to go. So, while I'd love to say yes, that charismatic leadership is behind us, not sure we ever will, as human beings, be able to stop our emotions being hijacked by the next, possibly even hollow charismatic leader. We all respond to it. We see it in all spheres, from industry to politics, and we shake our heads when we see through the facade. I mean, it's been happening since Genghis Khan, right? So, but that said, we do need leaders who can articulate a clear direction, a path through the fog, or at least at minimum, how we'll find that. I think the pandemic and the resulting impact on work has clearly shown the difference between leaders who exhibit that hollow charisma and fall back into the tools of command and control versus those who brought in, who are more effective as situational leaders, who are have brought in expertise with humility, knowing that they can't go it alone, that they've been open with the challenges that they might face, and are transparent. So perhaps the ability to be open, listen, bring in the right people into the dialogue is the evolution of leadership. The time of hollow charismatic leadership alone may be past, but it's time for leaders who can connect, engage, and motivate. So that's kind of my perspective on that.
I think that's a very good point to start with as well, because I love that they can't go alone. We've seen, especially in the political scene, not also just in the leadership side of things, but also in the political side of things, we've seen a lot of leaders wanting to go alone over the last 5 to 10 years, and we've seen the consequences of it. Adam, would you like to add anything?
I think it's just an interesting perspective, and maybe give you a few data points around this. We're seeing through LinkedIn data right now that probably for the first time as I've seen it is, work-life balance is outweighing compensation. And the reason I share that is that, employees now are ready to walk away if they don't get work-life balance. And part of work-life balance is around, and we see it as well through our data, is that workers are voting their time and their decision on who they work for based on managers that actually care about them. So I agree with Sheila that, yeah, of course, It's going to be hard to move away from the components of charisma, but I think we've also got to be very clear that we have experienced the pandemic and people have felt that, but we shouldn't ignore the fact that we have more millennials and Gen Z in the workforce that have a different generational requirement of leadership, and they will walk away, and they are looking for very, very different things, and charisma is not enough. I would say that.
That's a good point. There was actually a study, because we're having this massive walkout of companies at the moment on the back of the pandemic as well. But there was a study there, I can't remember who did it, but it was around how younger generations, millennials, and the start of the Generation Z that's starting to come into the workplace, on how they live their jobs. It's their own jobs is not just about the money anymore. It's about everything else that they can get, and that everything else they can get really is driven by leadership, by strong leaders that give more than just that's one let's go alone kind of perspective. But Emily, I hope you got enough battery until the end of the panel.
I hope so. I'm sorry, but this is also the beauty of Madagascar. So it's a cozy ambience now. And so yes, regarding, you know what I've noticed in let's say in these 25 years that I'm working and surrounded by leaders and leading myself teams and communities is yes, maybe some years back, you know, your charisma, your energy, your ability to mobilize people was sufficient. No, you got people on board, but you were sort of pulling everyone and making things happening. And what I see now is that yes, so this charisma, this energy is maybe required to trigger, but at the end, what makes the difference is when people really see that you're a loyal leader. You not fail them no matter what. You'll be there, and that actually your the way you're leading is an approach of bringing. Look, when I was talking about diamonds, now mining this inner diamond and bringing these people to shine and to be part of the journey, and to have an active part and a proactive part. Of course, some will follow because it's not everyone who needs to be in action, but charisma is not enough anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, true. And I guess that comes in line with the idea that even especially younger generations, they need more than just that. It's a whole different package that comes into the table nowadays. But Laura, to maybe get a different side as well, or some extra thoughts on this. What changes in perspective on leadership do you think the pandemic inspired, based on what everything else has said as well so far?
Yes. So, I mean, I think, you know, we all see mental health and well-being trending very high. It was always there. It's just become more in the forefront. And I believe that, you know, the great resignation, which was, I think, coined by Harvard Business Review, is real. And we're seeing that in multiple countries at all levels, but especially our diverse groups, women and other diverse groups. And, you know, so when you think about, you know, what does this mean for leadership? I think it starts with being better listeners. I think, you know, we saw some companies come out in mid 2021 or later 2021 in financial services, which is where I spend most of my time. And they said, okay, everybody's going to be back to work full time starting October. And there was a big backlash from the employees saying, you know, you're not listening to what's really important to us. We value having these flexible and remote working situations. And it's not just women, it's the younger generations, but it's every generation is valuing this and saying, we don't want to go back to what was there before. So I think one of the key things that we're seeing trend high in leaders is better listening and paying attention to the pulse of the employees. In addition, I think empathy is trending higher, and some leaders it's natural, some it's not natural, but it's critical to be successful. And I think it's smacking up against a key tenet, which is authenticity, which is if you're saying empathetic things, but you're not authentic, then you're not going to be trusted by the employees. And so ultimately, I think it comes down to what kind of culture do we want to drive? And the culture to me is one of a compassionate culture for the future. It's coming out through COVID and through all we've experienced, But my hope or my dream is that it continues beyond COVID, that we don't go back. We are going to go back, right? It's probably a little trending a little far on empathy, compassion, and I love where it is. I'm guessing that it will come back once things settle down a little bit, and that's very country specific. But I do think that the era of compassionate culture and compassionate leadership is here to stay, and I'm excited about that.
From what, yeah, so I was going to say, from what you said, I really just want to go and ask, like, name and shame the worst example you've ever seen out there. I think, but I'm not going to ask that question. But what you said is very good, and I think the point of listening, I think there really is a key to unlock a lot of doors in the whole discussion. But yeah, Adam, and then I'll go to you, Dave, in a second as well. Adam.
Yeah, I think we, as Laura said, we've learned a lot on the back of the pandemic. But I think what's really interesting as well is there's now no one size fits all. Somebody said to me the other day, you know, I'm going back into the office full time, 3 days a week. You know, we're now going to operate and lead teams in a hybrid world, and I think it's, you know, the way you lead an organization is very much segmented now. You know, we were all at home, and you know, we were all in the office, and we went all at home, and then now, you know, we're having to make decisions of leaders whether, you know, for example, we might be interviewing a candidate. Now, some of the candidates might choose to be in the office, so you get into considerations of things like proximity bias. Do you interview all the candidates the same way remotely, or do you meet all of them face to face? Or, you know, you have to make choices around fairness, and there's no one size fits all. You can't lead a team of developers in San Antonio, for example, the way you might, you know, manage a marketing team in Berlin. Very, very different. So I think leadership has to be now around this sophisticated, segmented approach to the business. I myself have got numbers of early in career individuals in the business. And what's fascinating is that, you know, the pandemic has taken away opportunities to learn by osmosis. So, you know, onboarding becomes particularly difficult for leaders. You know, how do you build people to a cultural attachment to the business that is generated normally by that sort of presenteeism? These are very different things that leaders got to think about now in terms of bringing people in, onboarding them. And if they don't get those things, I've talked previously on some of my posts around the trust contract. The power is with the candidate. There is skills shortages and scarcity. People can define their own employment working contract these days. And I think it's going to be companies that really lead with trust. So I call it, you know, we've accelerated from flexibility being a deemed benefit to quickly past, you know, workforce policy, very much into the trust contract, because through technology and automation, we can measure all levels of productivity. But if you lead with trust and allow teams to settle to their own norms, you will build that trust and integrity and fairness, and that's where people will retain. But if you don't achieve that, Zhao, people will then make decisions, and there are additional Gen Z components and millennials, which is they need to attach to a purpose. They've had time to generate time for a side hustle. If you as an employee don't respect that people want to develop their own either non-for-profit or revenue generating initiatives as a side hustle, they will go elsewhere. And these are the things that leaders have to think about daily, which is exciting as a leader. But, you know, organizations have got to support this leadership evolution. And I think this is where inclusivity really helps. You know, if we build more inclusive leadership teams and teams through the business, we'll be more relevant and trustworthy to the individuals that work for us.
I love it. Let me bring Dave now, because you work in this environment of finding leaders. So tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting. The number of different companies that Portman has worked with over the last couple of years during this pandemic, two things that in terms of leadership qualities that we have seen that have really risen to the top and really been valued by employees. And they're two very ordinary things. One is pragmatism, leaders that are pragmatic, leaders that recognize, actually, this is the work that needs to be done. This is how it's going to be done. And I'm going to involve you in getting it done. And previously, maybe before the pandemic, as a leader, there's a huge focus on the economic results, on that bottom line, on the bottom right-hand corner of the spreadsheet. It's about the money, the share price, all of that. And of course, in many organizations, those things matter. But pragmatism has really risen in the last couple of years as a leadership trait. And the other one, and I think everybody has used this word already in the first part of this webinar, is empathy. Leaders who can empathize with the people that they're working with, the people that they're trying to attract to the organization. And there's been a huge rise in that as a leadership quality, which has shocked quite a few leaders, for which empathy is actually, it's quite a difficult concept to get to grips with. And so those that are a bit pragmatic, those that have got some empathy for the people, absolutely have risen in the last couple of years.
Do you think empathy can be taught, or you have to be born with it?
I think you can learn, and you can learn how to be empathetic by involving other people. It's almost as simple as, have I been heard? Have I heard you? This is what I understood that you have said. Is that what you have said? It's kind of basic questions. I do recognize it's not as simple as that, but I think people who may have said, I'm not empathetic, well, they're going to need to be, otherwise they're not going to attract the people that they want. And more importantly, keep the people that they have.
Yep, and businesses people. Emily.
Yes, thank you, and I love how you're bringing empathy and you know, I wanted to share my experience when the first COVID confinement, when I was in Spain. So it was a shock for the Western world not to be immersed, everyone without distinction, in a huge crisis. And I started coaching leaders in resilience and crisis management, so Spanish and French mainly. I'm going to tell you a little story of one of these team leaders, and that's what I heard from 90% of them. This person was leading a team, and she was saying, you know, when I wake up in the morning now, the first thing I think about is my people, my team, how they are, how they doing, are they sick, are they not sick, how they coping with the confinement, etc. But I don't know how to ask them how they are, because before the crisis, we would go to work and everybody does what they have to do. We check off the goals, the objectives for the day or for the week or for the month. And you don't take the time to ask how you are, because it's like, that's not the topic. We're here to work. And also to bounce on what Laura was mentioning before about women also. One of them, she was a woman, she said, you know, I also have to protect myself. She was working in an industry, very male industry, a male-dominated industry. And she said, you know, if I arrive and I show like this vulnerability, this care for people, how is it going to be perceived? Am I going to be seen as a leader? And then when the crisis was entering, she had to break this ice. She had to find a way, because she needed that as a leader, because truly from her heart, they were thinking, I mean, all of them, they were thinking of their team and their staff, but also the team was in need to have this empathy, was in need to have this care, because they were living this terrible crisis. So I think it's been a beautiful learning for all these leaders. I mean, in the pain, but in the pain we grow so much, no? So it's been a lot of growth on empathy, because when we suffer, we develop empathy. That's the point.
An experience like COVID have really brought it to the forefront, the importance of empathy. But Sheila, let me go back to you now. We've kind of gone around my next question quite a lot here, but I want to see if you've got any other thoughts that you can add into it. What would you say is innovative leadership? What is the importance of innovative leadership in this new evolving business environment? That we are not there yet. This is still all evolving. We are talking almost like as if COVID has finished, but it hasn't finished yet. So we're still going through this. But how do you see this going?
So I think of it less as innovation, quite frankly, rather as adaptability, adaptable leadership. And what do I mean by that? When you have only one set of tools, as we started off the conversation, charisma, the ability to navigate politics, a step change to a situation you've never encountered, such as the pandemic, is going to require rethinking of that one tool. As they say, when you have a hammer everything looks like a nail. So instead of just a hammer, you need a whole toolkit. And so the only way you can do that is if the leader is flexible, adaptable, and particularly not threatened by different voices. I think as a leader, the best gift you can give yourself is to have people on your team who are not your clones, who are very different, or advisors who are strong enough to disagree with you and propose alternate ideas. And to be comfortable in such a team, you have to build that trust. I mean, the concept I was talking about right up front, and surround yourself, because it's too late to go look for those brave and diverse voices when you're already mired in that situation that requires a different approach. One great team I worked with in the US building a tech business, believe it or not, had a mix of nationalities from Bulgarian to Venezuelan, LGBT folks, a quite severely differently abled woman. We worked well together, built a business, had a great time. We fought tooth and nail. Can you even imagine a team offsite? But the great thing was that our leader was not threatened by us and gave us full reign. So you felt empowered, you felt brave. I've no doubt if that team still existed, we would have outperformed in the pandemic because trust existed well before we were thrown into that situation. So that's what I mean. You know, building that trust right up front is important, so that and showcasing your adaptability, flexibility is what is really critical to be able to react in such a situation.
I love that, and that understanding of bringing several people into the room, but not people just from one background, several different backgrounds walk in life, and I think that really brings a huge different soup of options and ideas, because so many things that we don't think about ourselves, and then you need someone else to say, it's like, aha, that was a brilliant idea, and such a simple idea. So I think that's brilliant. And Laura?
Yeah, I love everything that Sheila said, so I'll just add on to it. I do think that innovation is synonymous with inclusion. And Catalyst just released a report. I think it came out today. It was called 3 Inclusive Team Norms That Drive Success. The reason I bring it up is because one of the statistics that sang to me was that, you know, this was a big study, over 4,000 people, was a global study, and it said that 75% of employees with high levels of inclusive team norms experience high levels of innovation, team innovation, whereas only 16% of employees with low levels of inclusive team norms experience high levels of innovation. So I really think that innovation is synonymous with an inclusive environment. But just to take it a step further, you know, when I think of innovation, I think we all think of, you know, big innovations, big splashes. And I found that some of the most powerful innovations are micro innovations that come up from the team organically. And so again, innovation is synonymous with an inclusive culture. And so driving the right culture, a truly inclusive culture that allows for these ideas to surface in a crowdsourcing or any other kind of way, and, you know, using technology, you know, combined with the empathy to hear all the voices and to really make sure the decisions are being shared jointly. Ultimately, there has to be one decision maker, and I'm not a fan of letting decisions linger, but I am a fan of, let's get it all together. Let's really listen to everybody's voices. Let's make the best decision for the team. So that's how I feel about innovation. It's not just the big, it's the micro innovations that also matter.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think on the younger scale of side of things, I think that's absolutely what millennials and Gen Z are looking for. It's that sense of involvement, being part of the decision-making process. And I mean, everyone knows at the end there'll be someone that needs to sign the document, the contract, but it's being involved in the process and getting some ownership of the process as well. I think that's very important.
And ultimately, it comes down to the culture. Is the culture going to drive the right culture for that? Otherwise, companies are going to be losing even more employees, because that's what everybody's craving these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think, in my experience, many innovative leaders are curious people. They are curious to find out what is going on. They are always asking questions. They are listening. They are getting feedback. They are acting on the feedback. And I think to Adam's point earlier, when so many people are now working from home and that is now work, you've got to, as a leader, you've got to be constantly asking questions, challenging what's going on, listening, and that curiosity drives innovation. Out of that come paradigm shifts, come the whole way of working can change. And we are in a new world of work, as many studies, many books, many people have written about and spoken about. So curiosity in leadership, for me, is a real innovation in leadership. Good leaders, good innovative leaders are curious leaders. They want to know.
Amazing. Before we carry on, let me just let our audience know, if you've got any questions, place them in the box, because we'll start the audience questions in about 10 minutes or so. So we've talked a lot about the experiences that we've had in the last 2 years, how everything changed. But as I said as well, we're still going through COVID, still got at least a few more months of this to go across the world. What would you say is going to be the focus of leadership over the coming months as we come out of the pandemic across the globe, and bringing elements of diversity and everything that we've been talking about, but even more around diversity as well? Who would like to take the lead on that one?
I don't mind starting.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, Adam, thank you.
So I think you're right. You know, we are in a moment of change and continual change, and I think that will go on for a while. I think where should leaders be focusing now? I think it's working out the hybrid for me. You know, I'm not saying it was easy at all working in the early stages, and I'm not saying it was easy when people came back, but you know, managing a hybrid workforce becomes really complicated, and I think just that mindfulness and awareness to manage that situation becomes very, very pressing for leaders on how you show up, how you make decisions, how do you offer in a skill-short market the right flexibility. You know, the panelists have already talked about things like employees want freedom. You know, we know, for example, you know, getting very technical, but you know, you put jobs up there with good work-life balance and well-being elements in there, people will respond. You know, so how do you offer that whilst hold a culture? Because the danger is everybody works from home, everybody does what they want because the power is with the candidate and the employee, and you maybe lose some of the cultural tenets. So I think for attraction of talent, leaders have got to look at very closely at their authentic employee brand proposition to that. I think they've got to be clear to internal employees around the cultural tenets of the business and how do they live that in a new way of working. You know, we are going to face new obstacles that we've not seen, which are things like, you know, I touched on earlier, like how do you deal with the perceived impact of proximity bias? How do you not become a franchise business because everybody else is running their own structures and systems? And how do you generate, especially, you know, I'm sure Laura's seeing this in very large organizations, you know, those team norms, you know, allowing leaders that are not the top level leaders, but the frontline managers, the middle managers, to be empowered to lead their teams in the way they see fit, because they understand the culture, they understand the needs, and they're empowered to do their best work in the way they feel they can do their best work. And I think that is the challenge of the leader, not just in the next months, but in the leader of the coming years, I absolutely think.
Okay. Yeah, Laura.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Adam said, and there's so many lessons in leadership of what worked well, what didn't work well. I'll share with you, these are my 5 priorities as leadership skills. So, you know, overarching authenticity, empathy, but I have 5 that I'm personally focused on. The first one is stay calm and stay positive. There's so much going on with geopolitical risk, with COVID. People are dealing with so many different things. Just stay calm and stay positive. I think we need to lead through example on that one. The second is keep listening. I don't think we can listen enough. However we do it, we have to keep listening to our employees, to our partners, to our stakeholders. The third is get organized. And then by that, I agree totally with Adam around the teams. Get your teams organized and really focused, and make sure that they know that they're part of something bigger and feeling a part of that. The fourth one is around deliberate decision making. I feel strongly that, you know, it's very hard to make decisions in uncertain times. I've experienced it. Many leaders have experienced it. But the lack of decisions creates a lack of trust, or uncertainty creates concern. And so we can make decisions, and then we can come back and make decisions later based on the facts and circumstances, but we can never have enough information in the world of uncertainty. And the last one, and I feel very passionate about this, is intentional succession. We've seen droves of people leaving the workforce, a disproportionate number of our diverse populations. And so as we think about succession, we really do need to be intentional about, you know, who's coming up the pipeline and how we address them. Ready soon, ready now, ready late, ready now, ready soon, ready later, and be more intentional about our succession choices, or we're going to take a big step backward in terms of diverse leadership.
No, that's brilliant points there. And actually, I had the pleasure of going to an in-person event a few weeks ago, and quite a few of the things you said there, it's exactly the sort of conversations that people are having in the corridors. And you do hear some leaders, especially on the decision-making side of things. They're really saying this now is time to start making decisions. The time of being confused is kind of past. We now have to learn how to live with these situations. Dave, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I just think we've all spoken as well about culture, and culture can be very different when half of your team, or maybe more than half your team, is working from home. So therefore, you've got to train culture, and culture may be different in 2022 in an organization than it was in February 2020, because now the organization is more dispersed, whether there's 10 people in a company or 10,000 or 100,000. So leaders have got to train culture. They've got to understand that they may be a global leader of a global firm, but they've got to understand what's going on locally, because some of their staff may never come back to the office again because their office is at home and that's what they want. And that's where they do their best work. So I think that sort of globally minded localism is really important to bring that culture together.
I couldn't agree more with Dave. Sorry, Joe, couldn't agree more with Dave, because there are many, not all, but there are some industries that have been built firmly on a culture of presenteeism, especially in the early. And so those companies have not just got to teach it and train to it. They've got to evolve what they've had and re-identify themselves quite quickly. Because it's a competitive market right now. So just wanted to interject.
Yeah, no, I was going to add, because we've seen that a lot, especially in the news now, with governments getting involved in that kind of discussion of sourcing talent elsewhere. So I was actually just going to ask Dave, and maybe you, Adam, and everyone else on the panel as well. How do you think this is going to go in terms of bringing in more diversity from other regions across the world into a company that's based in Madagascar and the UK or everything, which before you used to source talents pretty much just within the city where you live in, and now we are becoming more and more a global world, where you can get someone in Australia working for you in New York, or getting someone in Beijing working for you in Luanda. But governments don't seem to be wanting to do that, and I guess there's a lot of tax reasons and money behind it, so let's not get too much into politics. But how do you see that going, and how will that how do you see the debate going? I mean, I don't really have much more of a question here. Who would like to just take that one, if it makes sense?
Do you want me to start, Dave? I mean, you can. It depends whether you're optimist or a pessimist. I'm an optimist. I think this is the fact that we become hybrid, remote, borderless. I think it's the biggest opportunity to change our organizations. I think we touched on earlier, like the Great Resignation. Actually, I don't necessarily see it quite like that. There's actually, if you look at the data, it's a great reshuffle. I think there are currently more people predicted to move internally than they are to move. I mean, it's pretty close, but it does show you that there's a lot of mobilization of talent within businesses. It's a huge opportunity from an inclusivity point of view to really engage talent pools that are wider than your direct connections. I think where businesses have got to really think about is, there's one thing being visible, engaging, the other is being inclusive. And actually then when people are through the door, that making people feel belong, which is a really, you know, harder job and a longer road to go down. But, you know, I think companies and leaders have really got to think about, how do they engage with wider talent pools? How does their value proposition become relevant and engaging to them? How do they then align and evolve the culture of a business? How do they feel that they're not just present, but that they belong, and then they can actually take the business to the next level? These are system level changes that will take time, but I think there are companies thinking about that, and they will have to, if they really want to truly unlock that talent, because if not, talent from other geos or for underrepresented groups, for example, will not engage with that business. And if they do, they will not retain that. And I think that's something to really, really think about as well. Dave, I'm sure you've got many more components to add on to that.
Well, I just think that the world, talent is globally spread around the world, and those that are in the more fortunate position are organizations and people of having cash to use, should be using it to help those in the developing world get on board. There are people that we could use in our organizations that don't yet have the tech, don't have the systems, don't have the architecture to enable that to happen. One of the great things about our digital infrastructure industry is that the work that our businesses have been doing has kept the world going for the last couple of years. And our job is to make the world smaller, to pull people together, because we will then have that diversity. We will have the attention of so many different people from across the world. And companies that do that will attract more talent to their company, because to the point earlier about purpose, people want to work for companies that have a purpose. And if you've got a purpose that says we want to make the world smaller, we want the best talent from anywhere in the world, you'll find some wonderful people wanting to join your organization.
And I think, Dave, there's one more point on that, which is it's, you know, moving the working world and the employers to think about skills, not profiles. You know, if you look at skills and potential and hire to that, which is where the world needs to go to, you know, and I think, you know, having strong programs around upskilling and reskilling within the workforce are absolutely pivotal. But, you know, we'll talk about talent scarcity, but fundamentally, if we, you know, the debate moving forward is all going to be about skills and skills of evolution and development.
Okay, Adam. Emily, and then after Emily, we're going to go to audience questions, because we've got a few through, so quite exciting. Emily.
Yeah, thank you. I love what you're saying, and it's true that this 2 years back, you would need a talent, you would need a special expertise in your team that, you know, existed the other side of the world, and it was like it was not existing because it was not here. And now you call a friend or a colleague or someone, you know, the other side of the world, and it's here and it's part. And I give you a concrete example. 2 weeks back, we have a severe drought and hunger in the south of Madagascar. 2 weeks back, we organized a working session with experts on drought risk management from all over the world, which we would have never been able to do 2 years back. Why? Because bringing these experts from United States, from West Africa, from different parts of the world would have been too expensive. You know, and it would have required so much organization. So we had these American experts who gave us so many insights. We had a colleague from Senegal who was sharing the experience of Senegal. And we were just having this, like we're having here, no? This panel discussion, this question, this answers. It was a working session. This 2 years back was impossible. It was happening once in a while, every 2 years. And now it's happening every week. I mean, as often as you organize it. So this is truly a blessing, and I think here that was just what I was hearing from Dave. Now you can bring people together and really make a difference.
And this is where I'm going to dare to say, this is where the digital infrastructure brightness comes in and creates this global, talented, diverse world that we have been able to enjoy over the last 2 years. But let me get some audience questions, and I think this one seems to be I think quite pointed towards you, Laura. So what are the challenges leaders face when they look at succession planning? Are there specific actions they should be taking to address them?
Yeah, you know, what we're seeing is a dwindling pipeline of diverse candidates in the succession to leadership, key leadership positions all around the world. And the pipeline is dwindling internally for many companies. You know, some of it is women in particular and other diverse groups dropping out of the workforce temporarily due to the additional unpaid labor that they're dealing with as a result of COVID, the additional responsibilities or less shared responsibilities with potentially their partners, or they might not have partners. And then so the dwindling pipeline and external to leadership positions is always a little bit more of a risk. There are potentially more candidates on the external side because all of a sudden our world is opened up in terms of location, which creates opportunity, but also creates risk. And you always want in any pipeline a mix of internal and external candidates anyway. And so the biggest challenge is really a dwindling pipeline for diverse talent. And so, you know, the other part of the question is, well, you know, what do you do about that, right? What, you know, if you're experiencing that, and you know, we're talking to companies about a variety of strategies. First and foremost, being deliberate about succession, ready now, ready soon, ready later, and you know, looking out 2, 3, 4 years, and the ready later, what can we do to get them ready now sooner? So you know, there's a whole strategy of a very surgical strategy around dealing with the candidate in the pipeline to leadership positions, global and country level leadership positions. The second strategy we're employing very strongly is around sponsorship, not just mentorship, but sponsorship, you know, advocacy for these candidates to make sure that we're getting them lined up. There was a statistic a few years ago that men on average have 3 sponsors at time of promotion in the room, and women on average have 1. And so you have 3 voices for the men and 1 voice for the woman. And so we're just trying to get that to be more equalized, and that applies consistently with other diverse groups as well. So sponsorships is important as well. You know, and then raising awareness campaigns around programming, you know, that has some effect, you know, talking about different topics like networking, personal brand, confidence, risk-taking, all of these topics that are very important as individuals are looking at their own career success. And finally, we as KPMG are a professional services firm, and so we're engaging, and I personally am engaging with our clients, with CEOs and other C-suite executives around their organizations, because as I said, my life's work is to develop and promote women in leadership across the world. And in order to do that, we need companies and cultures to start to move. I'm really pleased that in the last 2 years, the CEOs are coming to me now to talk, as opposed to me pushing that agenda on them. So I do see that there's a tidal change, but even if tone at the top is right, if tone in the middle is mismatched, then we're still not going to make a difference. So programming is needed at all levels. So, you know, dealing with succession, dealing with education, dealing with helping male allies who are out there and want to help but don't know what to do, helping with all of those, I think will really make a difference in the world in the future around this situation.
Kind of general sense organizing. Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, sorry, I was going to say, I want to just add to a little of what Laura said there, is really focusing on that diversity, inclusion. The gains that we've made over the past decade can be lost overnight, because leaders can feel more comfortable in an environment like this, with so much easier to connect and collaborate with people like me, when that in-person interaction isn't there to dispel our unconscious biases. So I fear programs like, as Laura was saying, sponsorship, where a senior, you know, invariably white male executive, who would have had their eyes open to the possibilities and talents of others who are different, could be a casualty. And I think the organizations and leaders who can grapple with this effectively are the ones who will really come out on top. So I 150% endorse what Laura's saying, and just wanted to add a point to it.
Okay, we are now almost on a countdown. We've got about 3 minutes to go, and there's one more question I would like to ask, but anyone else would like to add anything to this question? No? All right. So our last question goes around CSR, so corporate social responsibility. And it says, what role do you think CSR can play for leaders to engage their employees and set culture? So we would like to take that, and we don't have much time, but the more voices we can get in, so we're going to have to be concise now. Yeah, Sheila.
I am happy to take that. Having spent several years in that CSR role, I think the tone comes from the top. That purpose, the articulation of purpose as without just it being sort of purpose washing, as they call it, where it's just lip service. I think leadership has a great role to play by action, by engagement, and by really enabling people to engage on the areas that they're passionate about. And so I think it's there cannot be a daylight between the leader, their purpose, and their corporate social responsibility, or ESG activities, as they're increasingly becoming. There cannot be daylight between those, because it's really critical to be authentic leaders in that space.
Okay, I love that purpose washing expression. Amelie.
Yes, I think, I mean, Sheila just said it, it is about purpose. I remember Adam mentioning it, no, has the young talents will not stay in the company if there's no purpose. And what I saw a lot in CSR is, yeah, let's do something that is absolutely not related to the mission of the company, something that is no purpose. It's just, let's do the thing that we will put a photo and have a nice souvenir, and it's going to last 2-3 months, but it's not filling up the employees with purpose, which is very important, that the leaders need to bring this imprint. And another thing, and that's the role of the leader. I mean, if you're leader of a company, have CSR that is linked to the core values, the core mission of your company. So not only your CSR makes sense, in terms, but also it makes sense in keeping your employees loyal to the brand and feeling that there's no dissociation between the business you're doing and how you contribute through your CSR strategy.
Thank you. Dave, Adam, Laura, any final thoughts on this?
I think good leaders will understand what each of the individuals' own CSR is. What makes them tick? What's their purpose? What are they about? If you get that, and you can have hundreds and hundreds of different versions of it, but if you understand it and act on it, you'll grow a very successful business.
Okay, Adam.
Yeah, I was wanted to jump on what Amelie said is about the purpose piece. I think we have to remember that we're in an age where we're being checked out before we check out a candidate or a potential employee. There's nowhere to hide in the digital age. We don't make a hotel reservation or a restaurant booking now without a validation of our decision point based on data points and personal reference experiences. And it's exactly the same with whether you're taking a flexible assignment or whether you're taking a permanent opportunity or a validation of a manager within a new department within the company. And so I think it's about this authenticity that potential employees or candidates will be looking to assess your ability to demonstrate that your culture, your purpose is living and breathing that organization. And if you can't substantiate that, and the corporate narrative is not enough, it has to be the real story in the business.
Okay. And Laura, any final words?
I'll just leave with a quote. One of my favorite quotes is Sir Winston Churchill, who said, "Fear is a reaction, courage is a decision." So let's be courageous and make decisions as we go through this uncertain times.
Perfect ending. I couldn't have done it better than myself. Dave, Adam, Amelie, Sheila, and Laura, thanks so much for your time. And thank you for you who's watching us at home, either live or on demand. Stay tuned for future panels from Portman Partners and the Tech Capital on leadership, and a continuation of the Balance in the Boardroom series focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. You will soon be able to find a recording of this discussion on Portman's YouTube channel and on the Tech Capital's websites. To stay tuned on LinkedIn for updates as well when we put all this out. On behalf of Portman Partners and Tech Capital, thank you for watching and bye for now.